Hey, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Thank you for joining me. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Today I'm going to do a pet portrait. Okay, so pet portrait is not something I usually do, but my friend asked me to do a portrait of his cat, so I thought it would be an interesting time to tackle on this subject that I don't usually paint. However, I believe no matter what you paint, they're more or less the same if you understand the form. So we'll start off by doing a very rough drawing. Now you can barely see the pencil mark because I'm drawing very light on the paper. So during this stage, if I make any mistake, I can erase it very easily. Now this is a cat as opposed to human head, a portrait of somebody you know. This is relatively very stress-free because as long as it looks like a cat and kind of representing the cat you're painting, you're pretty much good to go. As I am starting to get the feel of the form, I start to tighten it up a little bit more and start to slow down and make a little bit darker mark here and there. Start to indicate the shape of the eyes, the nose and the ear. Now you can start to notice that I'm starting to do some more detailed contour drawing, and you can start to notice that there's some darker part that I push down a little bit more, I slow down a little bit more. Those part I like to call them anchor points. Some people may call them landmark. I like to call them anchor points. So basically what those do are the parts that I feel they are the anchor of the form. Then those are the part that makes up the form. So like the corner of the ear, the corner of the eyes. So those are the parts that has to be really clearly indicated. The line between that 2 points, they can be pretty lightly drawn. Now I slow down even more and make even darker mark to really get the accuracy of the shape. And notice that I try not to lift my pencil as much as possible. Try to do it with one continuous line so you don't break your train of thought and your line can be more organic as well. Now here's the part that I want to change my reference photo a little bit. Now the photo of her licking her paw, she's kind of looking at the camera, but her eyes are a little bit sort of evil looking. I don't believe she's an evil cat because she's a very friendly cat, but I don't want her eye to look like that in my painting. If you look at this photo, moments that her eyes that looks a little bit more rounded in a sense, so I want to do that. I want to paint that shape in for my portrait. And that's the freedom that you want to practice as an artist, right? You're an artist, you're creating something new, even though you're looking at a reference, either it's photo or real life. You have the power, you have the responsibility to change, to do any adjustment that's necessary to make the image more interesting and more powerful, to be able to tell the story with your painting that otherwise will not be able to tell by a photo. So this is the first wash. Because this is the very first time that I paint a cat, so I decided to slowly feel the form instead of just do a huge big wash that covers the whole cat. I want to start section by section. But I still need to keep in mind to keep everything wet and clean. So even though I'm painting kind of slowly, to building up the shape of her head, I'm still trying to keep in mind that I need to do everything at one go. So once again, one wash, one shape. Right, this is a complicated big shape, but I still want to do that within one wash. So before paint is dry, I'm starting to add different variation of colors from this kind of flashy pink color to a warmer color that's on her fur. Now this is an important part. I started dropping some darker color while it's still wet, so the bottom of it will kind of melts in, kind of pretty similar to the photo here. So you have a soft transition from dark to light. And because this is a cat portrait, I want to push the color a little bit more. Cats are very playful. I had a pet cat before. They're quiet, playful animals. So I want to kind of reflect that on this portrait. So I add a little bit more color, push it a little bit more. And here's the part that I use some dry brush technique to get that furry feel to it. When you're doing a portrait of animal, like, you only need a few places to describe their furs, and the rest of it can really just be solid shape with some tone variations. So a lot of times, if we would just suggest a little bit with some visual languages, your audience will get it. Right? I do a little bit dry brush here and there, and the readers who look at this painting, they will read it as fur. So here I just use some clean water and soften the edges. And when you do that, you start to feel there's some different layers of fur there. This play of different edge quality is really important for painting because it shows different type of form and surface. I'm not using a tiny brush and do millions of brush strokes, try to paint every single hair. That's just not how I want to do it. And that's simply not as interesting of a painting to me than just suggesting a few details and let the reader figure out. If you give every little detail that you see, you're not leaving any imagination for the viewers to interpret your painting. And to me, that can be a little bit boring. And over here, I'm applying some masking fluid. I know I rarely use that, but in this case, when you have something such a fine shape, such as the cat's whisk, I think it's a good idea to do that. So for the rest of the painting, I don't have to sweat about it. And if you're here watching, please do leave a comment because I want to know what you think, and I want you to tell me if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions and feedback, specific subject that you would like me to paint. And I wish to have more interaction with all of you guys. So if you guys really like what I'm doing here, leave a comment and let me know. So I'm starting to paint the eyes. So I'm carefully not to paint over the white area. I do want to leave some white around the cat's eyes. You can notice that I leave some white here and there. That's because I want to leave some what I call breathing room, breathing space. So if you fill everything in, it can look very dead very quickly. And I do that pretty much for every subject, from landscape to portraits, to the animal painting like this. And here I'm doing the same thing. I drop in some paint and I come back in with a clean water Not too much water because the paint will sort of run all over the place, but just a little bit of moist, and you can soften the edge like this. This is very important if you want some soft edges, if you want to create some soft transition in your painting. Always come back with cleaner brush and do a little bit softening. That will give some very natural looking transition. And then I start the first wash down to the hand area. The cat's fur color is actually not that colorful. I'm really pushing the colors here. But at the same time, I'm actually also trying to suggest the color of the light. So here am I doing the same thing, some dry brushing to create that white fur on the cat, with just a little bit of the texture of suggestion of information. You're able to start to see the cat is pretty furry. And while that hand is still wet, I'm dropping some very dark paint. That will help to create the pattern on the cat's fur. So there's two ways to create a soft edges. One is to come back in with a thicker paint. Another way is to come back with a clean water and to soften the edge. There are different effects, but it's pretty important that you know when to do that. Now I just kind of bring that value out into the background. And I quickly tap my brush to create some splash color effect, just to make it a little bit more lively, a little bit more fun. Okay, now the eye is dry, I can go back in and paint the dark iris. I have to wait it dry, otherwise if it's still wet and I go back in, the shape will spread out and it will become a very soft edge. And I don't want that for the iris, I want it to be sharp. Now the bottom layer is completely dry, so I go back in and add more dark value, just to give it more form, because the first wash is just some basic color tones, different color variations. And oftentimes first wash is the stage that you get the paper dirty, you get some basic colors on the paper, so you're not facing a white paper. The second layer is the part that you're starting to give some more value to define the form a little bit more. And once you do that, the forms start to turning. So painting the nose. She got this reddish looking nose. So I try to slow down and really get the shape down. And I extend that shape with different color into the eye area. This is something that you should pay attention to when you're painting watercolors, to connect your shape. If the shape is still wet, think about if you want to extend it, if you want to expand that shape and connect with another shape. When you're able to do that, your watercolor feels really interesting. So instead of painting 100 different little shapes, try to connect 2 or 3 shapes together. And you feel like your whole painting is connected and flow together, and that's pretty cool. So I'm pretty much done with the head, and I'm moving down to the body of the cat. Now I'm being careful not to paint over the paw. I try to preserve some of the white fur and the shape of the cat's paw. Some really warm value on the cat's body. And again, I wet the area so the shape will merge together. Play with color a little bit more. Some cobalt turquoise, yellow ochre. Now when I first got this photo reference, I thought to myself, okay, I really need to think about how to translate this photo into a painting, because the bokeh of the photo, like the blurry background, the out of focus part, it's definitely helped me to differentiate the depths, but at the same time I don't want to mimic that in my painting. So when I'm painting, I'm thinking about how do I do that. So obviously softer shape and blend up shape together, but at the same time I just need to paint that a lot looser. So to me, the focus obviously is the head. The cat, she's licking her paws, so that's the focus of the painting. It's not the body and stuff. So the rest of the painting, so I can really just keep it loose, and that it just kind of fade off and merge with the background. Now the background, again, I pushed the color a little bit more, added some carmine to get some pink color, just to kind of offset the overall grayish blue and yellow color. So I'm painting the paw area. This part I'm adding a little bit more layers, the fur on the cat's neck, just to give it a little bit more volume. She's a furry cat, and you really want to feel that volume of different layers of fur. Just a little bit more details here and there, adding a little bit more color. This is just some finished touches, and get rid of the masking fluid, and there you have it, a very quick, simple cat portrait. Hope you enjoy that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and visit my website at cafewatercolor.com Sign up for my newsletter to receive Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide. It is a 32 pages guide that I made to help you get started with watercolor. If you like my paintings, please also check out my product page.